I feel like at this point in Dota's history, like, it doesn't really matter if heroes are broken.
I bet $10 first, and then you're like, this guy's always right. I'm gonna bet $1,000 on this. All right, Avery, we have not that much to talk about this week. So I figure next week we will probably break down Riyadh and give all of our predictions, as that is the big tournament coming up. But right now we're in this space between TI quals being done, but Riyadh not really ready to go just yet. But the topic of discussion for this week is going to be the patch. So we did have a C patch for Dota 2. What are your thoughts on it?
Can we talk about anything else? Just cut out this whole start. Pick a different topic, dude. I don't want to talk about this fucking patch. It's so boring. It's so boring. Like I can't fake it, dude. I actually can't fake it. This patch, it's like it's big as nothing burger. These patches are just so irrelevant. Like, who cares? Honestly, who gives a fuck? Oh, like Festoration nerfed by 100. Woo, like, my God, dude. There's so many just dead facets, and there's so many facets that are obviously broken. It's just like, we're gonna take a fucking whole year to tune these by like 5% each time. Dude, there's something about Valve's philosophy where like they're willing to make drastic changes to the game, but then unwilling to tune them quickly. I don't know what that is. I'm sure there's like something that backs it up in terms of the balance and like, you know, I mean, I understand you can like add an armor or add 2 strength and the hero gets like 5% win rate, but I feel like at this point in Dota's history, like, it doesn't really matter if heroes are broken if you're going to tune them anyway. Like, who cares, right? If you're going to add like 100 facets and make these heroes broken for a month and then take 6 months to tune them, how's that any better or worse than just like tuning them a lot faster, so having other stuff be broken faster? You know what I'm saying? Like, I just feel like in the end it doesn't really matter because people are going to find broken stuff and abuse it no matter what. I can't remember a single patch where people didn't find broken stuff and abuse it until people complained it needed to get nerfed. So like, what is the advantage of doing slow tuning, I guess, if that's going to happen anyway?
Okay, so counterpoint to that is, I know Valve swore off the esports scene, said fuck Dota 2 esports, you know, fuck all that jazz, but Riyadh is coming up. TI is coming up shortly after that. Well, okay, a little bit longer, but Riyadh is a really big tournament, right? So maybe they don't want to make too big of drastic changes and hit the meta too hard right before a big tournament, right? And potentially create some broken shit that, you know, right now they're just trying to tune down the broken shit that's in the game and maybe tune some things up a little bit, but they really want to make sure they don't want to create anything new broken, you know? Deal with the whole broken shit first.
Let me ask you this. Do you think at Riyadh, by halfway through that tournament, there's not going to be like 10 heroes that are first phase, first pick, first ban that people are already bitching about?
Yeah,
by
course,
like a week two?
But
okay, so then that's what I'm saying. What is the difference?
But
what is the difference?
That will happen no matter what, right? It's the degrees to which they are broken. This hero is 5% more broken than the rest of the pool compared to a hero that is 10%, 15% more broken compared to the rest of the pool. And the number of heroes that are broken to that degree, right? That's what I would argue, is that, yeah, there will always be heroes that are considered first pick and such, but those heroes are only so much far above the rest of the field. Yes, they have an advantage, but they have, if they were freely picked in every single game, would they have a 60% win rate, or would they have an 80% win rate, you know? You're still going to first pick that hero if it's a 60% win rate hero. But, you know, if it was an 80% win rate hero, that impact when it is getting picked is much bigger. So it's just about the degree in which a hero is broken. Some heroes are going to be more broken. They're just trying to make sure that extreme stuff isn't in the game before Riyadh happens.
I thought that's why we had more bans introduced. Why do we have like 10 bans before anybody gets to pick anything if it's not to account for the broken stuff?
Well,
so just have you can have a wider degree now.
You did say 10 to 15 heroes that, you know, are first picked and broken, and that those are more heroes than bans. So, you know, maybe Dota just needs even more bans.
I don't know. To me, it's not about. It's not really about like tuning heroes slow or fast in the end to me, because I think the perception could be like that, but I think it's more just like why some of these facets are clearly worse choices than the other one, right? And I feel like that did not really get changed in the patch. That's my biggest thing. I think the heroes probably got bounced more. Like they brought down the high win rate heroes, Life Stealer, Night Stalker, whatever, CK a bit. They're going to bring up some of the bad ones, PA, Spectre, obviously getting some small buffs and are going to get pushed. But I feel like the facet differential among any single hero is the biggest clearing factor to me right now. And I feel like that did not get touched too much. Like it got touched as a product of bouncing the heroes, but I feel like they're attempting to bounce the pool of heroes, not necessarily bounce facets against each other, which I think is a big problem right now. Because maybe some of these are just unexplored, but again, I feel like maybe half the heroes, the facets, they're okay. You maybe take 60% of the time, but that's totally fine. And then the other half of the heroes in the game are like above that threshold to me, right? I think if you're in the 75 to 25 threshold, it's acceptable. You could have one facet that's going to be picked more often than not because it's more useful, but if the other one gets picked like at least 25% of the time, that's good enough for it to be like a cool niche facet that's good in some games. But if you're above that, if you're in the 80-20 range, the 90-10 range, then I think something is kind of wrong with the other one, because then I think it's not giving you an alternate playstyle choice, or it's not giving you an alternate way to use the hero spells. It's just significantly worse in so many situations that people aren't willing to take it. Either that means it's bad balance, or people are dumb, which people are dumb. Like the average person's pretty dumb. So, I'll give it another 10% error threshold. So maybe I'll punch the 75-25 to like 85-15, right? Yeah. Okay, I'll give you some extra error there for people being dumb. So in that 85-15, 90-10 range is where we're really talking. And I think some of those are, I think some of those are there, even if the stats say they're not. Because I'm sure people are going to take even the worst facet in the game, they're probably going to take it like over 10% of the time. Because, John Dota is going to boot up his game and go in and be like, oh, I like playing Nyx with whatever. And he's just going to pick it, right? He doesn't, I like Visage. I can now not micro. Like, whatever. That's not a real facet statistic.
It's so funny how they keep on making that facet just a little bit better. They're going to make, they're like, I'm going to make a non-micro Visage work somehow, I just wish they were more drastic on the facets. I think it would make the game more interesting in the short term and not really hurt the long-term balance of the facets in the end anyway. Like I think you just get better data. Even if some shit is maybe more broken in the short term, I don't think that makes the game less interesting to watch, I guess, right?
Sure. Especially facets that are spell designed. I think those are the more interesting ones to me. Like even stuff like the AA with how a lot of his facets and passives and stuff, right? They interact with his spell toolkit. I think that's like an interesting way to go, more than like Life Stealer gets 800 HP. Like to me, that's an incredibly boring facet. It is. There's almost nothing interesting about Corpse Eater to me. It's just extra HP. I think the interesting part was supposed to be, it's like a mini quest, Oh, you're going to build up this HP over the course of the game. Like how big can you get it? But what ends up happening is it's not an interesting addition to the hero. Like you never see it pan out in fights or anything. It's just, it's not interesting to the viewer. Even something like giving a hero damage would be more interesting than HP, because let's say you give Phantom Assassin the equivalent of Corpse Eater for damage, right? Then it's more interesting, right? Maybe this hero gets to like starts critting for 5,000. You're like, oh, holy shit, like that's at least something that you can see in the fight. But Corpse Eater is just, this to me is like, I hate this facet now that I'm thinking about it. I hate this facet more than almost any other. Not because it's bad, but because
you hate Centaurs even more.
Which I do. I hate Centaur as well.
Quest. It's literally just a time happens
I agree.
You get HP.
I think that one's significantly worse. I think Centaur got pushed in a worse direction. Like he got pushed in the direction that's supposed to make him more about kind of the old school Centaur. Like he has this extra strength gain and stuff, which is fine. The thing with Centaur is the extra strength is okay because that affects his spell kit to me.
Sure.
If the hero has ways to gain extra strength, then his like double-edged scales with it. You have the shard trajectory you can go. You have this cart that's kind of like a pseudo save, stampede, scaling off strength. So giving him facets or passes that give extra strength over time, I'm more okay with, because then it at least incentivizes you to maybe go the shard damage build versus even something like Crimson Guard can now scale with the extra HP, right? So it's giving you some pathways to choose from that benefit from these facets passives.
To
But like
be clear to the
giving
listener, Centaur's facet increases his HP over time, not strength.
Right.
But it still applies to what you're mostly.
No, but that's why I'm saying this is what I'm saying. That's why I think the facet's bad. I think that facet should be strength, not HP, because the fact it's HP means it's not incentivizing you to go down different trajectories. It's really only doing anything for like heart regen, resistance percentage, and I guess like Crimson Guard now.
Yeah.
But I feel like those are all items you're just gonna buy anyway on the hero. Like what? Why do we have to incentivize those items on the hero? I don't know. I feel like those types of things are they're not interesting to me because I'm not making any decision based off my facet choice. I'm just taking what I think is going to give me more value and then just hoping it pays off, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, I mean, whatever, right? I don't feel like those are as interesting. And I'm sure they're going to update a lot of them over time. I feel like it's probably going to go the way of talents, where a lot of the talents were just like flat numbers and respawn timers and stuff and then got changed. But again, it's just like...
So you would
just
prefer
throw something in there, man.
To
just throw
Witch
something in
Doctor,
there.
right? Witch Doctor would be, I would say, a good example of a big change where Voodoo Festoration was not good. I mean, it was good damage early on, but it wasn't that good for the hero early on. And then they're like, okay, now you get half the heal on your hero. And all of a sudden that adds a huge amount of survivability. The trading is incredible on the hero, and it's broken. Straight up broken. And then they're like, okay, now we cut that heal in half. We gave you 50% heal, now you get 25% heal.
Mm-hmm.
You like that kind of balance that they're doing?
Yeah, I like that approach better. I mean, because then it's... Sure, maybe your personal opinion is you don't like that Witch Doctor playstyle, but I think it's more interesting. It makes the hero have a different pathway in the game he can play for. He doesn't have to be this Cask, Mally, Death Ward Witch Doctor. He can be heal early or max, dominate the lane with heal, and be cool in the team fight with some drawback, which is you lose the team heal, right? I think that's a very interesting dynamic. Was it overtuned a bit? Yeah, of course, but that's what I'm saying. Like when you make something broken, it's always easier to tune. So something like that, okay, you have a C patch 1 week later, tune it down. It's going to be good at some point, right? And hopefully your goal is to make it so it's still viable in certain situations, but not universally better than his other route. I think that's, to me, a more interesting direction with facets than like just these random flat number buffs that just outweigh the other one because they're too good not to take. And then like, even if you tune them down, it's just not an interesting decision. Like someone taking Corpse Eater is never going to be interesting to me. There's no world in which I can look as an analyst at a game and be like, oh, this is a Corpse Eater game. He needs that extra average 600 HP, you know?
He's going to deny it 75%. Watch out.
Yeah, I don't see the interest there as a viewer. It's interesting. It has novelty value, right? It's interesting for like the first week because there's some novelty value. Like, oh, it's like 1,000 HP. Holy shit. Or like the novelty games that go like an hour and a half. Yeah, those numbers become kind of funny. But I don't think they're actually good in the majority of Dota games, which only last 25 to 40 minutes. And it's like 400 HP, and who gives a shit? Buy a VIP booster if you need it, right?
If it's inherently boring, if a facet is inherently boring, it only becomes exciting when it's broken, right? Corpse Eater was only interesting because the numbers got high, and then they're like, wait, that's actually too high of numbers. We need to tone it down.
Yeah, it's stupid.
So it only becomes interesting if the basic numbers are too high and therefore broken. And yeah, so that kind of leads you to, this you're inevitably going to balance it out, and then it's just going to go back to being boring again. I would largely agree with that. I do appreciate I mostly agree with I wish they would take more drastic changes. I would say that there is probably just a history and maybe a philosophy in balancing Dota, that the history of Dota says that we have gone long periods of time with a certain patch, and everybody thought these were the things were broken, and then just naturally over time those things did change, and we found out like, oh, there's this totally unexplored hero with this unexplored item build that actually is the right way to do it. So maybe that is just part of it, and part of their philosophy of not wanting to make these drastic changes. Just let the meta play out, let people find things. They're going to discover new things. But I would argue Dota players do this faster than they've ever done. Dota, where it's at right now compared to where it was at 10 years ago, things move really, really, really quickly. And I think players, not just pro players, but like general players, are better at figuring out how to break the game, basically.
Yeah, I mean, there's an argument that basically Dota is just the equivalent of a machine learning algorithm that just works really slowly, except there's no machine. It's just the pool of million players, because you haven't really gained or lost that many play. Like, I would imagine the core pool of people who play Dota for the last 10 years has stayed relatively the same.
Yeah.
In terms of that core. Like, those guys are just slowly getting better and better at figuring stuff out faster, adapting faster. It's an artificial selection pool, basically. So, like, yeah, you have to keep up with it to some degree. I think they have, but I don't know, man. I feel like it's just weird. I don't really understand it.
So
I'm not criticizing
OpenAI
it.
should write some patch notes to stay ahead of humans. Is that what you're saying?
Maybe. I mean, it could already be doing it. Who knows? Who knows? Valve went to the Bahamas, took a month off, let OpenAI do it, you know? Why not?
Okay, so patch aside then, we did touch on a topic that we have touched a little bit on. There was a Reddit post about basically that heroes are getting too tanky right now. And that is, I know, a complaint that we have both talked about. And it is a part of a general problem of power scaling up in Dota, right? And I think this post was right on the money, because it's something that I was talking about before the tank thing came in, is that, like, you have talents, you have Aghanim Scepters, you have shards, you have all of these extra things you're getting. You're now able to get to level 30, right? It's like all of these extra things that you are getting, you're getting way more stats and way more whatever than you ever used to, which means the general power scaling of heroes has gone up on average, and that results in certain problems. And the post basically talked about how it wasn't the tank problem that we're having right now is just a reaction to the power scaling that happened when it came to spells in last year's meta, where we had all of these spellcasters, you know, like Lena was a good example, where their spells were just doing so much to be able to burst heroes down, and you naturally had to be able to have a way to be able to deal with that. And that's where Valve came in with things like they started coming up with things that were not BKB, right? It was like BKB was the meta. BKB was so much the meta that you needed a refresher for your BKB. Didn't even matter if you had no other real spells or items to use. You bought a refresher for double BKB because it was so important. And Valve was trying to create alternative solutions, right? It was like, outside of Pipe and BKB, what else is there, right? And they came up with Wraith Pact and Eternal Shroud. I think were the two biggest solutions that they came in with, trying to create some sort of alternative to BKB. Then they also changed BKB to kind of make those other solutions even more viable. That if BKB doesn't give you quite the same, like, pure magic immunity, then these magic resistance items become, you know, a more interesting alternative. So they're basically saying that, you know, this tank meta that we're now, you know, encountering is just a reaction to that, and Valve trying to find this balance between all these heroes are getting stronger, get that balance back in place between tanking up and burst.
I mean, I guess. I mean, I guess to some degree, but was it really spells that were an issue? Like, I feel like it wasn't spells that were the issue. It was just BKB was imba, and people finally figured out how to exploit it. Took a long time.
I mean,
but
BKB didn't really change. So you're saying that it took 10 years?
BKB did change.
How so?
BKB changed a lot. What do you mean? You can throw any spell into it now.
No.
You take extra damage.
When you were saying
I'm talking
BKB,
compared to old BKB.
Yeah, okay. You're saying BKB was broken. You're talking about the old BKB.
Yeah, I'm saying when people went, you know, refresher BKB on Razor.
Right.
First two items.
Old BKB, right? Old BKB did not change for a long period of time, right? Old BKB was pretty much the same. They maybe nerfed it a little bit. Where, you know, you had these scaling down charges and stuff like that. But, like, BKB was largely the same for almost, like, 10 years of Dota.
Right, but I'm saying spells were not broken because you still had this Heart Blade Mail period as well. And all of these types of builds, no matter what, make a lot of the flat spellcasters feel useless, at least as cores. And I don't think that's changed. Like, I don't think there was ever, I don't remember the last patch where flat spellcasters were good in Dota as core heroes.
There was a problem with burst damage, though, at some point. There was a problem with Lina and PA and, like, basically just heroes kind of casually getting one shot.
Yeah, I think Valve clearly wanted to avoid heroes getting one shot in fights because it's not that interesting outside of the initial burst. Or it can be interesting, I guess, if you can burst one target and then it costs you long cooldowns and then you can still play the fight out with other spells. Maybe Lina's in that category now, but I mean, I kind of agree with that. I just feel, I don't even know. I don't even know if it's bad. Like, is it bad right now? Is that the question? Is this supposed tank meta bad for the game? Is it bad as a viewer? I don't know. I don't know if that's true.
I think the tank meta is maybe better than the one shot that we're going through, but I don't think it's that much better. Mostly because I think it is fairly uninteresting and pretty simple gameplay. I think it leaves for a lot of there is room for a lot of error. You know, when you're just able to trundle around with 5k HP, you know, your positioning is not nearly as important. Your spellcasting is not as nearly as important. It leads to less big moments in team fights as a result, because when you hit a big spell, you do not end the fight with that one big spell, right? So that part can be less interesting. I don't think it's necessarily like all bad, right? There is good pros and cons of like the pros being this nice back and forth of team fight, longer interactions between players in team fights is definitely interesting for sure. But there are definitely cons to it for absolutely.
All right. So one thing I've been thinking about this is I feel like it's only bad because the guys who are unkillable also kill you at an equal pace, and there's no way to overcome that. Like, what is my inherent advantage of picking a hero like Phantom Assassin versus something like Primal Beast? 6-slotted Primal Beast, I think, just straight up beats 6-slotted Phantom Assassin.
Okay,
like I'm not even kidding.
So
I actually don't think it's close.
Sure,
I think he destroys her.
I agree. And
like, maybe you have like double divine abyssal PA, right? You can like jump stun him and like crit him 3 times or something. But in most situations, outside of some perfect vacuum, I think 9 times out of 10 you rather have the 6-slotted primal, like Shiva's Octarine, Heart, Blade Mail, Ags primal, right? He literally just does more damage on a consistent basis than the hero that is designed to be a pure damage sink.
So you think the damage is too high on the tanky heroes?
Yeah, I think that's why I think we're seeing so much of them. Because if your drawback of playing a tanky dude like a Primal or a Centaur and building Shiva's Heart, whatever, was that you had lower damage from one of your cores in the fight, he wasn't as big of a solo threat, then you'd have to think about picking these heroes and itemizing that way a lot more. But as it currently stands, there's very little downside to doing it. There's almost no downside to going Heart, Blade Mail, Shiva's, Octarine, whatever on all these tanky boys, Ags, because they all end up doing the same amount of damage as these Agi or Spellcaster heroes anyway.
But they kind of need to be able to do some sort of scaling damage, because maybe this is some sort of weird catch-22, but the tanky heroes, if you don't do any sort of scaling damage, then imagine Centaur without a scaling double edge, right? He's just kind of like stomping and double edge, and he's not killing anything, right? Then you're just kind of like stuck doing nothing against other tanky heroes.
And I think this is the actual power creep that I think has existed in Dota, is that it's slowly turning every hero into the same paradigm, which is you tank up as much as you can, you deal as much damage as you can, and you be as independent as you can from needing your team to function. Which I think removes some of the strategic elements of building a lineup. Like, there no longer exists this idea of, I'm going to have a tank, and then a healer, and then a spellcaster, and then a damage dealer, right?
Didn't
That
you
doesn't
just
exist
say
anymore.
5 minutes ago? But is this a bad thing? That sounds like a pretty bad thing to me.
Well, I don't
Avery.
know. I mean, it's just a different direction, right? It just depends how you want the game to be constructed. Like I think there are pros and cons to it. Genuinely, I think the cons are that maybe strategically it's less interesting when certain heroes get picked with each other, right? Like if I pick a centaur who can't deal damage but is a tank, maybe that pick becomes more interesting if I have things like Zeus or Sniper, because then they're fulfilling a more niche function, right?
Yep.
And then the hero can excel in its niche more, and it becomes more interesting, more dynamic relative to the rest of the pool, instead of like Centaur and Razor and Zeus are all just kind of like 5k HP heroes that are dealing damage in a fight. Like, is there really that much there's not as much difference. I think that's the biggest con. I think the biggest pro though is that you are less dependent on your team to function, which for the average pub game is pretty good. And for the average competitive game is also good because it lets all three cores have more say and control over their own destiny than being dependent on one guy. If you're dependent on one guy more, then you kind of go back to these old days where like you could have offlaners that was the skill difference in offlaners nearly as important in the old days compared to now? I'd say no.
Sure.
Because it was a lot more about your carry and mid being higher skill, winning mid winning its lane harder, and carry out farming the enemy carry. And if you had those two things going for you, you probably won 8 out of 10 games. Like, people don't like to admit that, but that's kind of how most of those games in the old Dota were won. And it's mostly because of this. Because that like offlane skill differential, it mattered a bit, but not as much as it matters now. Where like if you have a really good offlaner now who can just straight up carry the game, he can straight up carry the game. If your carry has a bad game, he can straight up make up that damage differential. And if he's good about it, he can make it work, right? I think that's why players like ATF have shined in the last year, because this guy is just better at every other offlaner at carrying the game when he needs to, and knowing how to do that through damage, utility, or tank. Like, he goes a lot of these different builds. It's not always just itemizing for damage. This guy knows how to play the modern offlane role better than anybody. He understands it, I think. That is the pro that it gives you. It gives a larger dynamic range for each role individually. You know, his game is not as dependent on his carry finding a lot of farm. His game is not as dependent on his mid laner winning the game. And so that trickles down to pubs too. I think you as an offlaner, when you go in a game and your carry gets fucked, the game's not just automatically over. I think in the past it was just automatically over. Like, you were more dependent, because you being tanky doesn't win you a Dota game. Like, who gives a shit if you're some like Heart Centaur, if your carry has no net worth? Doesn't do anything. Your role is irrelevant. So that's the downside of that type of like strategic Dungeons and Dragon lineup, you know, whatever the fuck you want to call it. I actually think
it does sound to me like the way you are putting this, I'm not sure if I feel 100% that way, but the way you're putting this sounds like Dota is losing a lot of its unique appeal, which was, for me, compared to League of Legends or other games, was the fact that there was a inherent, very focused set on team and draft, because you needed heroes to be able to cover each other. You needed to be able to, every hero had like a glaring weakness and a promising strength, and you needed to be able to cover each other in those regards, and like those interactions you talk about, right, where you pick your lane combo that you pick with or whatever can really help make these heroes shine a lot more. Does this sound like you're really losing that unique aspect? That sounds like pretty core to the identity of Dota, for me anyway.
I mean, I think you are losing it. I think it's inherent in the direction they've gone with the bounce. Now, will Dota still have more of that than almost any other game out there? 100%.
Yeah.
So I think other games like League lose this more every year than Dota does, if it is losing it. Like almost every modern game, I think, is more in that direction of things being similar to each other rather than different, because it's easier to balance, easier to sell, whatever the hell it is. I think if you look at most successful competitive Dota teams in the current state of Dota compared to 3 or 4 years ago, I think the number one thing I would do if I were coaching a team right now is push the idea that the 3 core roles, and even your 2, so even your 4 to a large degree, are not dependent on each other to function. And if you can find heroes that are fulfilling all of those requirements or or power levels in a game on their own, then they end up being broken. Like no matter what. And then your job as a team is to just figure out how to play those heroes to their maximum capacity and figure out the itemization. And this is where I go to, if you have an offlaner that can tank up, and by tanking up, he deals as much damage as a carry, it's broken. If you have a mid spellcaster that deals a fuck ton of damage and you can find a way to itemize on him that makes him have 4 or 5k HP, he's fundamentally broken. I think the hardest piece is these agi carries, honestly, because I think in theory the agi carry is like he's supposed to have the right click damage. So if you can find a way to make him tanky, he becomes broken, but I don't really know what that one is. I guess there's been some patches where like Faces Void or Spectre have ticked that box, right?
Yeah.
Like you've had some patches where you like Scotty Faces Void with 4k HP and like the backtrack, he clearly becomes broken. There's been patches with Spectre like that. I think it's hard to do though. Like you can't really buy, I guess there was a Satanic patch. That's maybe the closest thing. Like these like Satanic Octarine Ursa. Ursa's a great example, right? I think Ursa is the perfect example.
Carry,
yes. Why is Ursa playable where like a lot of these agi carries aren't? Because he gets 4,000 to 5,000 HP with like 10 seconds of 80% damage reduction and becomes an unkillable god. And then his damage is through a spell that stacks. So it's independent of him getting damage items. He doesn't have to build damage items. Again, these types of heroes are fundamentally broken in the modern state of Dota.
Seen from the Octarine Wind Waker build.
Exactly.
Ursa,
right?
It's like literally no damage.
Exactly. That is what fundamentally makes a hero top tier right now. You find the heroes that can do that, they become broken because it just makes your life so much easier. Like why am I going to play this Phantom Assassin with 2,000 HP who might get stunned and then just killed in the stun? I'm going to have to pick a save for her. I'm going to have to give her a good lane. You know, I can have 5,000 HP Octarine Wind Waker Ursa, who's like can save himself, can remove his own stuns, and then does the same amount of damage, right? There is no downside. There's literally no downside. So these heroes are never going to be as viable again. And that's why I think the offlane pool is just like, it's figuring out the tanky boys that can deal damage through their spells. Mars, Centaur, Axe, like Primal Beast, right? Whoever it is. In the meta, Shiva's was Omega broken because Shiva's made you tanky and it amped the entire damage for your team. Fundamentally broken item. It's way too fundamentally broken. You have to nerf the numbers to such a bad point where it's no longer viable. But like, this is why I think you're just going to go through cycles of finding these heroes and then nerfing them, because there's nothing to stop these heroes functioning the same way. They can all get equal gold on the map. They can all deal damage. They can all tank up. Like items are crossing over a lot now, which means things like Octarine or like Sanjin Kaya or Kaya Yasha or even things like Satanic Heartblade Mail, like you can build them on a huge amount of heroes. So once certain item sets, you know, groups of 2 to 3 items, which we see a lot, once those sets become imba on a numbers level, it's just a matter of which heroes apply them the best, which is why I think we're just getting more and more of these patches where it's like, it kind of doesn't matter what hero you pick. It matters which 2 or 3 items you buy on those heroes, right? Are you buying Heartblade Mail this patch? Who uses it the best? Are you buying Octarine Shivas? Who uses it the best? Are you buying the Satanic Butterfly? Who uses it the best? And that just tells you which hero you're supposed to play. The heroes are relevant, I think. Like genuinely irrelevant. There's maybe 20 heroes that are so bad that you're unpickable, and there's 20 heroes that are so much better that you're trying to pick them more. But honestly, to me, modern Dota is way more about the items than the heroes, because I think the heroes all just function kind of the same. Like who cares if you have Arena Spear, Shield Crash instead of Centaur Stomp, Double Edge Stampede? Like, I think people just overvalue these things. There really isn't that big a difference. But if you have a hero that can buy Octarine, Heart, Shivas in the good patch, like if you have a hero that can rush Shivas when Shivas was broken at Kuala Lumpur, right? That's what won you that grand final. You pick Primal, Doom, Centaur offlane, first item Shivas, most broken hero in the game. Was it because those heroes were so much better than every other hero spell-wise? No. They just got Shivas the most reliably and the fastest. And that's all that matters. Because then you have a tank who also just fucking wins the fight off damage. Fundamentally stupid and broken. You find the heroes that do that the fastest, you win. You literally win a tournament.
I mean, I think you're definitely right. People overrate the heroes, and that's just because that's the foundation of Dota in the first place. What do? You pick your hero, right? What do? You draft your hero. You find a hero that you have an identity with, and you feel like you have this, this guy matches me and my personality, and my skills with that hero have enhanced, and I'm very good with him. And so
Right. I think it's
people
a
just
fallacy.
like tie with that. And at the professional level, where everybody can play any hero, right? You like
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
outside of some micro heroes, maybe you can't play those, but for the most part, you should be able to play kind of almost any hero. Then then it's going to become a lot more about you're going to see rather that impact of items versus heroes. Yeah.
Like if I had any advice for a team going into the CWC/TI period, it would be to almost ignore heroes and spend all your time discussing items and which item buildups are broken, like the order of them, that when you can get them, who can get them, right, and then go from there. It doesn't mean that the heroes are relevant, but like it's which direction on this chart are you going, right? Are you going to start with, I think Terrorblade, Spectre, PA are going to be broken this patch, and then figure that out from there? Or are you going to start with, I think Radiance, Shiva's, Octarine are broken this patch, and go backwards to figure out which heroes use those the best? I think every year more and more I see this way of doing it is more successful than the old school way, which was always heroes. The old school way was 100% team discussions were always centered around which are the top 5 heroes this patch, right? And then you go in the ban phase, and like each team bans like 2 of the top 10 they think are broken, and you try and pick from the rest, and it's this trade thing. I think that mentality of the game is just uber outdated, honestly. And I still think there's a lot of teams utilizing it. And I think because they think like that, they have no chance of beating the top teams in the world, who don't necessarily ignore this either, but are better at doing the itemization and figuring that out, whether they realize it or not. And I think if you look at like a lot of the past tournament winners from the last 2 or 3 years, they were the teams that just did this the best. Maybe not self-aware that that's what they were doing, right? Maybe they stumbled upon it, or their heroes that they were really good at happened to do this, and they figured out that itemization good. Or maybe they were playing those heroes because they felt better because they were building these items, right? It might have not just been a conversation of like, I think this item is the most broken of the patch, but I think it eventually got to that point. Like Tundra at TI that they won, right? This Wraith Pact pipe or Summons Abuse was like, they were just better at it than everybody else. You look at patches where there was like Radiance Abuse, and suddenly you have like Kunkka's mid and stuff, right? Building first item Radiance, or Alchemist is super good. You have patches where like the Satanic Butterfly build was good, and it was like these teams like VP and Secret that were dominating with these like hyper agi carries. Like, I don't know. It just goes in a cycle. I think Falcons are dominating right now because their itemization is just better than everybody else's, and they figure it out faster, and no one's caught up. Like, ATF is not a better Mars player than other people by such a large degree at auto wins of tournaments. Is he the best Mars in the world? Yes. But is he that much better than like, an XG is going to play a Mars, or
if he hits one more spear more than another
Yes.
player, is that going to turn into a win? Probably not.
I'll tell you why he's a better Mars, because that guy's itemization is way better. Like some games he buys Blink Wind Waker. Some games he buys Octarine BKB, no Blink. Some games he buys, his old Ag scaling build, right? That was another build for Mars of like, I get Heart, Ags, BKB, suddenly I'm unkillable frontline, and I'm killing you with this stupid Ags. That guy is super good at figuring out the builds that make him really hard to kill, so he can always start fights, but also threaten you.
He also did
he's just the best at it.
What's the Revenant's Brooch? He also did the Revenant's Brooch one,
yeah,
right? He did the one-shot magic damage. Yeah. He was always ahead of everybody else when it came to those builds.
That team supports do it too. Like, people ignore this aspect on supports, but I think one of the things that helped Tundra at TI 11 that Snaking and AUI and those guys still do on this new Falcons is I think they're the best at making their supports function the same way. Extremely hard to kill, incredibly annoying to focus down in fights, and at the same time they create a natural threat of their own. Like these heroes like the Crit Hoodwink, right? Super annoying hero to kill, is in the trees, mischance, scurrying around, super long cast range, can stand really far back. And at the same time, it's throwing out these like Acorn Bushwhack ult combos that deal like 2,000 damage. Like, it's the same idea, right? And then you're building items that help you get there. This Gleipnir, whatever it is. I think there were patches where Gleipnir was super good, and you saw heroes like Weaver come back a bit more, right?
Yeah, I was going to say the first thing, the heroes that I thought of for this patch, Weaver, Mirana, right? Those heroes, I think, fit the bill of independence, hard to kill, have ways to be able to push out waves, and you pair them up with one other hero, and you have kill threat.
Yeah, so supports generally can't build super tanky because you can't go like hard octarines and stuff on supports. So the supports that are innately hard to kill because of their spells that you can build damage on become fundamentally broken. The supports that deal a crap ton of damage with their spells and that you can maybe build utility on become fundamentally broken. And you're basically looking for one of these two pathways in most games. The easier pathway is to find the supports that are unkillable because of their spells or really annoying, and then just build damage on them because it's just like way more straightforward. So like the heroes like the Hoodwink, Weaver, whatever, that can just build Vessel or Gleipnir, if you can't kill them or it takes way too much to kill them or find them in a fight, they just do way too much. Like they can scout, they can play aggressive, they can ward aggressive. The innate advantages you get are super huge. If they find a random 5 at the start of the fight, like you Vessel bug this 5 on the backline, he's just dead, right?
Yeah.
It's just like, you know, you compare this to something like Disruptor or something. It's like, it's not even fucking close. It's not even close from a fundamental perspective.
Weaver felt like the freest MMR when I was playing it on this patch.
That's why.
It's just like, game is bad, you just cut waves. They can do very little to stop you most of the time. You're just out there cutting wave, throw bugs, swarm through. If you have the shard, one shots the wave. Okay, on to farming up some neutrals until the next wave spawns.
And the thing is, it's a product of how much gold is on the map too. I think because there's so much more gold now, these 4s that can be the squishier, more elusive 4s that build damage are way more viable than, say, the old map where you didn't get as much gold on the 4. So the heroes that kind of perform this function, I felt were the heroes that innately tanked up through their spells and then only needed 1 or 2 utility items. The perfect example of that for 5 fucking years was basically Tiny and Io. I think Tiny and Io were the 2 most broken supports of the last 5 years of the old map in Dota because they required very little net worth to become very tanky, right? 2,000 gold mech on Io. He's one of the highest EHP heroes for a long time in Dota. And Tiny, all he needs is like level 2 ult, level 12, and he has like 20 free armor with 2,000 HP. It's incredibly stupid value, right? And then you just buy Blink. Basically, both those heroes functioned with 2,000 gold. They can go in a fight, be super tanky for how much net worth they have, and still be a threat. The Io made your core hero a threat because he's amping his damage. Like, it's hard to notice, but this Io Lesh was doing a fuck ton more damage than Lesh, right? Yep. This Io Gyro was doing a fuck ton more. So he's effectively a large threat. And the Tiny is a huge threat because he goes in and tosses your dude into your fucking team, and that guy's just dead. So it's like effectively he just got finger of death from 100 to 0. That is an insane value for a hero that's also really hard to kill. And you see this. You see this at the teams that always come back to these on LAN when they need them. But I'll be interested to see if the meta pushes more towards these like Weaver and Hoodwink type heroes over like the Tiny and Tusks, simply because you can get more gold on them by farming aggressive areas of the map and being hard to catch. Like that might be more valuable than being tankier as an initiator in the fight. And I have a feeling it is.
On this discussion of the heroes versus items, I do wonder if facets will help combat that. We are basically in the early days of talents, right? If you think about where talents were on release versus where they're at now, they're very different beasts. I'd imagine facets even more so, just because I think they're even more unique and impactful, being that they are hero to hero, like they actually change full out abilities a lot of times from the get-go, right? From level 1, a lot of them. Yeah. So I do wonder if that will change some of that decision making, if that will give more power to hero picks and choices, right, than items, because you have these facets that are a different decision tool that you're making that give you a different kind of impact that will allow you to be able to combat specific scenarios, right? Counter certain heroes better, something like that.
I think that's the goal.
Yeah.
I think the goal of facets is to combat this push towards generic quality. Like if a lot of these heroes are starting to function in the same way or trying to achieve the same goals, and facets can be a way to break that up a bit. I wonder if that's where we'll end up, or if it'll just be more like sprinkles on top of the same cake, you know, like just more of the same thing. I don't know. I genuinely don't know. It's probably just a bounce thing. I think it's going to be really tough because I think it will also require a lot of time for players to understand all of them and use them before the decision shifts from I'm picking this hero. Okay, which facet do I want in this game? To do I want to pick this hero for facet A or B in this game? Those two decisions are very different. And I think to get to the second one is going to require just a fuck ton of time, honestly.
Yeah.
Because like I can tell you, when I go in a game and pick a hero, I'm not thinking about like picking him for a facet in this game, right?
Yeah, again, unless you feel like the facet is broken. I am picking Venomancer, whether it's support or core right now, because I think Plague Carrier is broken.
Sure.
Right, and that's all I'm doing right now. Is all I want to do right now is play support Venom. For those of you guys who want to try this out, just try out. Just go in like a demo lobby or something like that. Put wards on you until you have 6 or 7, and then go farm like a hard camp. It's incredible how fast this hero can farm.
Yeah, he's a vacuum.
Neutrals. It's insane. And you said with all this extra gold on the map, there is certain value to heroes that are being more elusive, so your cores can farm the jungle, right? They can go out there and farm the map. Maybe this is the inverse relationship, right? Your cores are out there farming the lanes, and you've got this support that is able to vacuum up the neutrals early on before any other hero really can. I'm having a ton of fun with it. It's also super fun to play in lane and stuff. But yeah, otherwise, yeah, most of the time I'm picking the hero. I'm not even thinking about the facet until like afterwards, and most of the time it's default. Right now, the facets are largely figured out. That one is way more broken or way more generally viable. So like 80% of games, I'm just defaulting to this one. So yeah.
I guess I feel that isn't gonna change. Like I don't see a way out of that because you're still trying to achieve what I was talking about in terms of making the heroes function this way, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. Like I just don't see it, like you're gonna want to. It's just my opinion. I mean, I could strategically or analytically be wrong on these points and be proven horribly otherwise the next year or two. I think I would find that even more interesting, to be honest.
Traditionally, big patches end up with lackluster TI results. I think most of the time when you have a big patch come through, the TI that happens after that is usually not that good. That's what I found anyway. It's not nearly as competitive or interesting because there's more often more broken stuff left in the game. So I would not be surprised if this Riyadh and TI are not as good as some other ones, just because of that.
Yeah, maybe.
But I'm also old school as fuck. I thought the best TI was TI 6 because I thought that was the best meta, and it was one of the most stable patches of like all time. So, yeah, that's me.
I think it's random, to be honest, but I guess we'll find out. Bold prediction, sir.
All right. Well, it kind of closes out. We had a very long episode last time. This one's still going pretty long. So I think we'll kind of wrap it up here next week, or next episode, since we do this twice a week. We will talk about Riyadh. We already know, obviously all the teams. We already know the groups for Riyadh as well. So we can get into our predictions of what's going to be happening there for Riyadh, and
can't wait to get some more right, man. Ooh, should bet on it.
Because I don't know. I'm just saying. I feel like Avery's making somebody a lot of money out there.
Probably losing some of the money too. It's like one of those things. If you're right like 8 times in a row, it only takes being wrong that once or twice because you like start going all in.
Oh yeah, yeah. You bet $10 first, and then you're like, "This guy's always right. I'm gonna bet $1,000 on this."
That's how it always fucking works. So don't bet, boys. Don't bet. I'm not saying that, but if we had a way to measure how more I am right than Austin, that would be valuable. I think that would be valuable to the viewers. I think they'd want to see that. I think they'd want to hear, the exact tally here, because I'm gonna cook some predictions up. I'm gonna cook them up, bro. Though I will say, actually, I think it's way harder to predict the high pressure Dota tournaments than like the standard LAN.
Yes, I would agree.
Like way harder. It's not even close. I think like the average LAN, I could have a fairly good read of the teams performing well and who's going to do that and who's consistent, right, and who might bomb out. But these like TI level tournaments, I get them. They're just impossible because teams just crumble. You don't expect to crumble, and certain teams just figure something out and make some crazy run, and it's just like, and that just slices the whole bracket, and you're like fucked. It's like, what the hell, you know?
I do this activation for a company, and so I've already put in my top 4 for Riyadh. Do you want to hear my top 4? It's pretty simple. Well, would you like to guess?
I bet I can guess your top 4. I bet I can guess your top 4.
Go ahead.
Wait, let me look at the team list here.
List it top to bottom. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Hold on, let me bring up the team list. Let me bring up the team list so I don't forget anybody. Okay, let's see. Do you have to get the order?
Yeah, just see if you can get the order.
Oh, I think you put Falcons number 1.
Yeah, I did.
I think you probably put. I think Spirit and XG are your 2 and 3, but I think
Spirit
that one's
was
hard
my
to
2.
know. Okay, I was gonna say Spirit 2 because it's a big money tournament.
Yep, big money.
I would have said XG number 3.
Okay, they were 4th.
Who would have been the last one though? My God, there's no way you did not put Liquid. You bet boom, I'm gonna say. You might have put Liquid though, because you're a stupid Liquid fan. You did, didn't you?
I knew you were gonna say Liquid. No, I did not say Liquid.
You put bet boom. So I said bet boom. That was my answer.
No, Game of Gladiators.
Fuck, it was one of those two, but I actually didn't think you rated Game in that high. But
I feel like they're kind of on the up. But I don't know, just something. Looking at my list now, I made this prediction probably like 3 weeks ago, and nothing's really changed on my feelings on it. And I'm just, that is not that interesting. Boy, that is a very uninteresting predictions I put in. Sometimes I try and put in some spicy ones, but I feel like this season is, I don't know. You have like a very clear front runner in Falcons. And you have the top dogs that are already in place. And I really don't see too many people having a chance to upset that. But I don't know. We'll go into that conversation more in detail next week on Not For Broadcast. Thank you very much for watching, and we will see you next time. Goodbye.